everybody to Crisp ASMR. Today we are continuing the series on philosophy because it's a topic that I really love, and you guys also seem to really enjoy the first philosophy video, which was on the absurd trolley problems and doing that together. So to continue that, we are going to be looking at theology and philosophical arguments for the existence of God. And what that means is basically like arguments from scholars and thinkers of old and yonder who have tried to use logic and other reasoning resources, cognitive ways to sort of prove God's existence. I realized I could have added arguments against the existence of God as well, but maybe that's already really ambitious, because even though it looks like there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 arguments here, it's actually a lot to unpack. So we are going to be ranking them on this scale that I have edited. So we're gonna have Slay for the really, really good arguments. Good, intellectually interesting, and bad. To look at the arguments, I'm gonna go through what all of these arguments are, at least to my knowledge, and give you my honest, unfiltered opinions about them. And I hope you enjoy that. So sit back, relax, let's learn, let's discuss these spiritual ideas together. Now, just a little disclaimer, this video is not about whether or not God exists. That is simply not the content of this video. We are purely looking at what thinkers have said about the topic and how they have tried to quote-unquote argue this idea. And I might actually add stuff if I can think of something. Now that I think about it, maybe Wittgenstein would be fun to talk about, but we'll see how this goes. So without further ado, let us begin. We're going to start off strong with the teleological argument, or also known as the argument from design. I believe this word teleological comes from the word telos, which is, I believe, purpose. I think. Let me search this. Okay, yeah, like the ultimate object or aim. This is the argument from design. And the idea is this: the fact that the world seems to fit together and work so smoothly such that it seems like there was a designer, basically, and that designer must necessarily be God. So there's evidence of design in the world. And this analogy can be used to understand this. For which is if you say which is I think that of the watchmaker. This is actually harder than I thought because I didn't script this beforehand. But basically, if you saw a watch in the middle of the forest and you picked it up and you turned it over, you saw the way it moved and there were all these cogs and inner mechanics, you would naturally come to the conclusion that because it's so intricate, there's no way this thing grew out of the ground. It must have had a designer of some kind. There's a clear purpose to tell the time, and it must have meant that someone designed it. And because of the way it just works so intricately. And so in the same vein, the way that Earth works so beautifully, gravity or even rain, or any the way evolution has come to be, it's so magnificent and so intricate that the only logical explanation is that there was a designer. And so at first glance, I think we can look at that at first glance. I think this is quite compelling, I must say. The idea, I think, if for those who really believe in the beauty and the just how fascinating, have you ever felt like just learned about the earth and realized how fascinating it is, or the way everything fits together, like certain ecosystems that are so in sync, it really does feel like there must be some, like, spiritually, it does really get to the sense of like you do appreciate that beauty in nature, and then that could, I suppose, lead you to conclude like a god, or at least a designer, an intelligent designer, one that could think of the purpose of the earth. But there are some problems with this argument. Immediate criticisms could be like, just because there is complexity doesn't mean it has to have a designer. Like other forces, first of all, it could be other forces at play that lead to the appearance or semblance of design, such as evolution. The reason why we have adapted to be so efficient, or like maybe the way that leaves are designed are really beautiful, but actually this is the result of evolution and like natural selection. It's not from design. It's simply like natural forces have caused it to be the way it is. And if you're arguing from like the intelligent, like if you're arguing from the perception that it's because we can see a purpose, therefore there's a designer, actually one might argue, like, what is the purpose of the earth? We don't know that. Like, clearly it's different saying an acorn's telos, because an acorn's telos is eventually to grow into a giant oak tree. But does the earth follow that same kind of pattern? We don't know. What if the earth just is, right? I don't know if this is super reductive, but I can see how the counter argument would be that, you know, there is beauty and it is efficient, but that doesn't necessarily mean that someone designed it the way leaves are not, I guess, designed. And also, like, what is the purpose of the earth? We don't necessarily know that, or you cannot look at the earth, I think, like physically and infer an ultimate purpose. Personally, I feel like purpose is something that you have to invent for yourself. I forgot to put a disclaimer at the beginning as well about my own religious beliefs, but maybe now that we're already here, I'll hold off on it. But I think it's beautiful, so I'm gonna put the teleological argument. I think it's convincing if you believe in like the beauty of like the world and stuff. But does that mean there is a designer? I think it is a little bit of a leap, but I'm gonna put it intellectually interesting. Just because like thoughts about design and purpose are just kind of beyond us. Beyond humans anyway, I think. Let me know in the comments, just a fun little question, what you consider to be, you know, the purpose of the universe, if any. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Alright, starting off strong there. Now, let's look at, this is a great one, the cosmological argument. Or another way to think about it is like the argument of causes and the first cause. You know, that saying that it can't be turtles all the way down. And the basic premise is something like, because we observe in the universe that everything has a cause, right? Every action or every event in the world can be traced back to a cause. Like the reason I am, first, you know, if you push a cup, it'll fall down. That's very simple. And the sun rises because of the gravity of the earth and the planets and whatnot. I'm not a geographer, but you get the idea. There's a cause for everything. Every action and a cause and a reaction. Likewise, every action will cause something. But this can be extrapolated to even more complex things, like the idea of, like, even me recording this ASMR YouTube video today is caused by, you know, accidentally stumbling on ASMR. I used to like make fun of it, and then slowly I started watching it. I got into it actually through watching makeup videos. But specifically, I couldn't explain why I really liked watching, like, not makeup on you. I didn't start with like that kind of role play, but it was like someone applying makeup on someone else, and somehow that sparked me down this entire rabbit hole. And years later, here we are, and I'm whispering to you about the cosmological argument. But anyway, so everything has a cause, and that can be traced back like until the beginning of the universe. However, the issue with that is that apparently it's not possible or logically possible to have what is called an infinite regress of causes. Like at some point there had to be a beginning, like a starting point. For many of us, we consider that the Big Bang, right? Like scientifically, that's the Big Bang. But even before that, like something had to have caused the Big Bang. And I think that something, if we trace further back, it must be God. So it really hinges on this idea of we cannot have an infinite regress because we cannot have causes all the way down. So at some point it must have had a beginning, and if there was any ultimate beginning, it would be God. I think this is definitely, there's something really compelling about this because, you know, we like to think like what caused the Big Bang. A lot of naysayers would be like, oh, like that, it just happened. Like that was the beginning of the universe. There's nothing else before that. There was no God, whatever. But, you know, maybe for those people, for a lot of people, I think that isn't sufficient. Like we as humans seek purpose and seek reason, seek explanation. I think it just makes our brains, I don't know if it's like, how to say, metaphysically real, but like a purpose, but we seek it at least to have understanding and control of our lives, I think. So, you know, for a lot of us, I think the Big Bang was it might not satisfy. It's like, what caused the Big Bang? Was it just random, like suddenly there was a Big Bang? Or, you know, would it be that a creator decided to create it and spark the events that birthed the universe? So I think it definitely hinges on whether you think there needs to be a first cause and whether the Big Bang is like not good enough by itself. And I must say, like, I think something really nice is indeed the fact that there's a lot I think humans don't understand. A lot of science is just us trying to make sense of the world in patterns, but we don't know if science is like a universal truth or if it's just the human construct used to understand. And actually, when there's a new understanding, we replace it. Like something that always fascinated me, at least, okay, this is very rudimentary. I'm an English teacher, okay, guys, but like, let's say back in the day before quantum physics, it was like Newtonian physics, and that was the way we understood the world. But then come the advent of quantum physics, which also explains the world at a quantum level. However, the rules of the quantum world do not kind of clash with the rules of like big world physics. So even then, but both of these systems work, and I think there are scientists out there who work to try to resolve the differences in these two systems of physics. And I remember back in high school, there was discussion about whether gravity, like how does gravity even work? We understand we can observe it, but how does it work? There was something like a graviton, maybe like some kind of particle responsible for it. Like, we don't know. There's a lot in the physical world that I think we still do not know. Apparently there's a lot of the earth that we haven't explored. Let me Google that, actually. Okay, like apparently there are mountains we haven't gone to, and I think ocean. Like, okay, like this is a random website, but I think the point stands. Like, there's a lot we haven't actually like seen on the earth, I think. How deep have oceans been explored? Okay, apparently, like, 5% of the ocean, according to UNESCO, is actually explored and the rest is unknown. So, there's a lot we don't understand about it, about the universe. Is that good enough? I think, yeah, well, so yeah, I think that is good. But also so I think, yeah, there's something really kind of deep and fundamental about this belief in a first cause, whether or not that's God or whatever that kind of creation looks like to you. I think it's quite compelling to think of that. But I think the idea of why cannot an infinite regress not be possible? I'll have to look at that up. But yeah, some people have an issue with the actual infinite regress. Maybe, but maybe it is possible that we're in infinite regress. How are we to know? Literally, our experience is 0.0000001% of the entire time the universe has existed. How would we know if there's no infinite regress? I think that an infinite regress not existing is kind of like a inference from the physical world. Nothing lasts forever. Death and deterioration are inevitable. The same way we don't expect the future to last forever. But wow, I think my brain is on. I think I feel the nagging of the limits of my thinking capacity. I'd love to know what you think about the first cause and the infinite regress, but for the purpose of this video, we're gonna put it at good. Almost a slay. I think it's kind of good. Let me look at the infinite regress. Why can there be no infinite regress? Okay. Okay. So apparently it's just bad. It's just it fails Occam's razor, which is the idea of having excess is bad. We should go for the simplest argument, basically. Okay, so for example, the cosmological argument promises to increase quantitative parsimony by positing that there's one first cause instead of allowing an infinite chain of events, which decreases qualitative parsimony. Okay, alright, so okay, in a way, the first cause is a simpler explanation for some people, like God. Alright, wow, this is a rabbit hole. Rabbit hole. Okay. So we're gonna put it at good. Maybe even slay, actually. Now I'm kind of convinced. There's a lot of interesting. I think there's something very intellectually juicy about first cause. Yeah, nah, but let's just put it at good. Vague, but good. Okay. Pascal's Wager. This is, I think, by Blaise, the same Blaise Pascal, who was responsible for give me a second, for math stuff. Yeah, Pascal's math stuff. Amazing. Okay, famous math guy. Probability. Pascal. Oh, right, of course. Pascal's triangle. Duh. Okay, math stuff. Okay, this is math Pascal. And so he wanted to get his common folks into God, get his friends to go to church. And he thought of a fun way to do that, which is called Pascal's Wager. And we call it known today as Pascal's Wager. And the idea of this is a simple game theory thing. So if, let's say there's a box and there are two options and two outcomes, right? So either you believe in God or you don't believe in God. So this is 2 by 2. You believe in God, you don't believe in God. And then God exists or he doesn't exist, right? And what he said was, if you don't believe in God and God doesn't exist, then you lose nothing. I guess if you believed in God and God doesn't exist, sure, I guess you have some loss of maybe you dedicated your life to God and something that wasn't real, and then you're really sad afterwards and you don't actually have any gains, right? But it's a minor loss. But let's say you don't believe in God, but God does exist. Then actually you could be condemning yourself to like a afterlife of hell. So we are going off of the Abrahamic religion type of God, right? So that would be like an infinite kind of loss. On the contrary, if you believe in God and God really does exist, then you stand to win a possible eternity, like a afterlife eternity of bliss and joy in heaven. And therefore, if you weigh the options overall, like this is game theory basically, the expected utility of believing in God, like the expected value that you will gain, is infinite, because there's a chance that you win everything, like the ultimate win, right? But if he's not real, then okay, you don't really lose that much. However, if you don't believe in God, and either he exists or he doesn't exist, fine. But if he does exist and you didn't believe in him, then you stand to like rot in hell, literally. And therefore, the only logical thing to do for any rational human being is to believe in God. And then bada bing, bada boom, everyone is now theist, because you stand to lose everything if you aren't, and gain everything if you are. So there's the argument. Now, I think this is super interesting. I really thought this was, and I think this is a really interesting idea. But obviously I think the gut feeling is there's something sacrilegious about using like utility and reward and loss, like gains and losses, to judge whether or not you should believe in God. And I think belief, like faith, right? The idea of faith is very different to reason. Like, maybe I can agree with Pascal. Let's say Blaise is my friend, and I'm like, wow, Blaise, you're so right. Like, what have I been doing my whole life? Like, of course, the obvious option is to believe in God, duh. Like, I'm gonna come, be religious with you right now. Like, let's go, friend. Now to church and stuff. But, like, I think even if you know that rationally, that doesn't mean that in your heart or, in the depths of your being, you truly believe in God. Like, it's one thing to rationally know you should, but another to really believe, right? It's one thing to have a crush, or like, it's one thing to tell yourself that someone is a good romantic partner for you, but actually you don't really love them. Like, you don't really feel it deep in your heart. And so is that really faith in God? Like, can it really inspire true faith? Which I argue requires like a kind of deep belief beyond just, oh, it's beneficial for me to believe. But there's something fundamental when you believe in God, right? It's like a kind of like your identity shift you take on. It becomes your whole life. Like, your worldview changes. Every way that you see the world is different, I'm sure. It colors everything, and that's not something that you can simply like reason yourself into doing, I think. So yeah, another issue is like, I think that's really the main thing. Like, okay, so yeah, that's definitely a key issue with it. You can't really reason it. It's something that I think you have to feel, but also like that 4x4, like that 2x2 square could be inaccurate. Like, we don't know what each of those actually entail. Like, we don't know what heaven looks like. It might not be a infinite like happiness. The only reason that's there is because someone said it was possible. But like, I could say anything's possible. I could be like, you should believe in God because God will grant you like cookies forever, like endless cookies. That doesn't mean that you should reasonably put it on the 2x2 of possibility. And the possibility, like, that assumes like even possibility, like 1/4 or something for each, but actually that's not the case. There's a chance that maybe the existence of God is very, very slim. I mean, or very, very large, so therefore you should, but it could be very, very, very minor. Like me saying tomorrow you'll have loads of cookies. Like, sure, it's possible, but like, yeah, if I said tomorrow you're gonna have 1,000,000 cookies at your doorstep, like, it's definitely physically possible for it to happen, but the probability is very unlikely, and therefore me telling you that because it's possible, you should bank on it, and to not bank on it is to lose out on the possibility of 1,000,000 cookies. Like, I don't think so. I don't think that makes sense. Likewise, like, we don't know what hell looks like. I argue that, in some, like, imagery, biblical imagery, it seems to be like fire and all that suffering and stuff, but I think I really like an interpretation of hell that could just be like the absence of God and spirituality, not so much like an active punishment or fire or torture, but just like the absence of like that kind of connection, which is also bad. But yeah, so in conclusion, like, rationality versus true faith, and also, like, we don't know what is in the boxes to begin with to wager. It's not an even, like, wager, so I'm gonna say A. Actually, let's just put it at bad. I think it's bad because it doesn't really address the issue of whether God exists. It just addresses whether we should rationally, how we should behave. It doesn't really deal with the true root of like God's existence. So we're gonna put it at bad. All right. Now we're getting a little bit more personal. Let's actually do one. Let's do a contrast, right? In contrast, okay, we are going to go with the leap of faith. This is from Handsome Man, Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard. I think he was Danish. Really, like, truly the first father of modern existentialism, which is so existentialism being the idea that we are free to create our own meaning, and yeah, basically create our own meaning. And he thought that all of this talk about like reason and like theology and like, oh, you should believe in God because it's beneficial, he thought all of that was nonsense. Like, get out, because at the end of the day, faith is, I believe, is a gift from God. And the point of faith is that you cannot ever use arguments, you cannot ever use reason to prove or argue about God, because that's just not God's nature. Like, the point of God is the point of faith is to simply have faith, and it is completely just a leap of faith. Like, and there is no guarantee. You will never know the truth, except arguably maybe after we die you might know, but the point is there is nothing in the universe that will actually help you to know for sure. And that is both the like terrifying fear, but also the beauty of faith itself. Like, you just have to take that leap. So will you take my hand and believe in God or not? And honestly, I'm gonna put this as an immediate slay. Because that's just who I am. I love my existentialists. Yeah, you can tell I like Nier Automata, so what does that say about me? But why is this slay? Because this reminds me of what I was saying about thinking about Wittgenstein. The idea that kind of poking at this idea of proving God to begin with, like, can you even do that? And when religious people, this idea of language games of Wittgenstein, like when religious people talk about God, they're not necessarily talking about something in the realm of like empirical proof. So they're not asking for you to like prove physically using physical evidence whether God exists or not. Instead, like, they're talking in spiritual terms, and they're talking about faith. So like, yeah, so like, their proof for God is that it is a leap of faith to believe. And it's whether you take it or not, and it becomes something that's deeply personal. And because it's deeply personal, I love it. It's a sleigh, but obviously that means it's very, its power as an argument for God becomes quite weak. Like, sure, that's true. Like an argument to convince others. You cannot convince others, but at least I think this will strongly convince yourself, given that there is probably an absence of signs in the universe that would point to God unequivocally. Like, you can argue design and cosmological argument, like, yes, they can quote unquote point you in the direction of God, but do they scream God? Like, we don't know. I don't know. At the end of the day, I think you have to decide on your leap of faith. These might help you reach that, like, these arguments might help you reach there, but I think it has to be faith at the end of the day, and I really like that. I'm not even thinking about whether it's compelling. I just think it's such a sleigh. Like, that's just such a life, a way to live. Free will, you know? Like, go for it. I love it. Purely personal opinion. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments. I would love that. I love it. Alright, so let's continue on the vein of, let's go back to some logical fun. We are going to look at the ontological argument. I think credited to like Saint Anselm of Canterbury or whoever from like ages ago, like centuries ago. It's very unique in that it is an analytical argument for the existence of God, so purely using logic. Whereas the previous ones, I guess, Pascal Wager, forget that, but the previous two arguments in the good here, like the cosmological argument and the teleological argument, these reference evidence found in the universe, right? So this is the observation of causes. Teleological was the observation of design present in the universe. Whereas instead, the ontological argument looks purely at analysis of like the definition, the logical definition of God as a being. So let me recall, I think it goes something like this. So the definition of God is like a being that is perfect, like ultimately all perfect, all I guess the Abrahamic God anyway, he's all loving, he's all knowing, he's all like powerful and like total perfection. And so that's step one. Step two is the key part. If something was all powerful or like perfect, then like by definition it would have to exist, because it's a predicate of perfection. So a necessary feature of perfection or like omnipotence is the quality of existence. And therefore, it follows that God necessarily exists, because his definition is to be perfect. Bam. And yeah, just let that sink in for a little bit. God is perfect. Perfection means to exist. Therefore, God exists. Now, it's definitely really interesting, because, you know, that's how we would use. Why is this might sound a bit like goofy to people, but like, let me explain. It's kind of the way like a triangle like necessarily has three sides. It's kind of part of the characteristic of a triangle. Like, you can't have a triangle that doesn't have three sides, right? A triangle with four sides is no longer a triangle. It has to have three sides. In the same vein, like, God has to exist because, you know, existence is part of perfection. So hopefully the triangle analogy helps. Right, so that's where we are. But obviously, like, there are, I think my initial thoughts is honestly, intuitively, like my gut reaction to it is it's not that convincing. Just because, like, it seems like it could be that God is a concept that you define, like for fun. Like, who came up with this definition? Like, I did. And then because I came up with this definition of God, therefore, poof, like, he's become existent necessarily. But yeah, not only does he exist, but it's like a necessary feature that he exists. It's like he must necessarily exist. But the issue with that is, like, you could slap that definition on anything. So there's this famous counter-argument about the perfect island. So, like, let's say I imagine a perfect island. It's got, like, the most clear blue waters, the softest sands, and, like, the trees are lush and everything. And it's a perfect island, and because it's perfect, it has to exist. Therefore, my perfect island exists. So suddenly, like, the argument seems to fall short, because just because I've described this entity and ascribed it to be perfect doesn't mean that I can make it exist. So in the same way, like, we don't know if that's the case for God. You could argue that maybe something in the world has to be perfect, then you'd sound like Plato. I don't know. I just think that as I grow older, this is a little bit, like, intellectually interesting, but, like, I don't really know if I can be really convinced by it. Like, I'm not moved in the same way as I thought it would be by pure logic. So we're gonna leave it at that. All right. Little water break. Next, we have the moral argument. Ooh, okay. Super fascinating. This one is more, again, for the Abrahamic God, who, like, kind of rewards good people with heaven and punishes with hell. And that's important because of the nature of the argument, and I believe it goes like this. So, obviously, there's another observation of the universe, which is that people, there is good and there is evil in the world. Right? I think that's probably something that we can agree on. Or maybe not. Maybe some of you are not, don't believe in anything that's good or evil. But I think that that's really hard for me to believe. I really do believe that there are things that are evil. Ooh, to be fair, like, the universe itself has a lot of quote-unquote evil in it. That's nature, right? Like, lions violently kill their prey, but that's just nature. But I guess, yeah, nature itself is quite violent and sad. So anyway, the point is, but again, that's a human judgment, right? I don't think the lion thinks it's evil, or the lamb doesn't think it's evil when it's going to the slaughter, right? Or unjust. I think it's just nature. But somehow humans have the unique ability to ascribe good and bad. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Whoops. So yeah, this starts from the first assumption, which is that there is observation of good and evil in the world. Okay, and the next, it's that good should be, rewarded and evil should be punished. But unfortunately, step 3 is that we don't really see this happen in real life. Like, it's often the case that good people might not, end well, and there are lots of evil people out there, quote unquote, who end up with no consequences, and there's no justice. But, and the only way for this to make sense in the world is for God to exist and to have the afterlife in which we would be judged fairly. I believe that is the moral argument for the existence of God. Now, where do we even begin? Okay. I think there is something very deeply, I would say naive, but foolish. There's something very naively human about it. Like, and I think I can say that from my ivory tower, but honestly, like, I get it. Like, I believe in justice, and it is true that, there's a lot of injustice in the world. And it sucks. It really does. Like, there's no way around it. Injustice is terrible in the world. But then it takes a lot of... that's a massive leap to therefore say that God will exist in order to correct the justice. First of all, there's no necessity, there's nothing necessitating justice being served fairly and accurately in the world. If anything, it reads like wishful thinking, which honestly, like, I would love that to be the case, but I just don't know if that's true. And there's nothing that necessitates that. Like, obviously, I would love it to be true, but I think it's hard to move from the observation of evil existing to therefore there must be a force that punishes it, because justice is not a given in the world. And I think even further than that, we don't even know if justice is real. Like, our ideas of good and bad and good and evil are not, like, they're could be totally arbitrary. And so who are we to decide that, the punishment wasn't enough? Do we ever know if someone isn't punished for their actions? Like, I wouldn't know if years down the line, like, maybe I see, like, let's say there's someone I don't like and they did something bad. Sure, like, and it doesn't look like they're getting consequences, sure, but how do I not know? How do I know that they're not having some kind of consequence, like, years in the future? And therefore there is justice. Like, who are we? I think we are too tiny to know if justice is being served or not, and whether justice should be served, and whether even our conceptions of good and evil are accurate. Although I will say, like, I do have strong opinions about it. I love ethics, as you can probably guess from my Charlie Problem video, but I love discussion of ethics. I really do believe there are some things that I think are evil, right? Like, was it abusing children? Sure, like, that's just evil regardless. So I do believe, and I believe strongly in that, but again, like, I won't have the arrogance or confidence to say that it is like a pure evil. Although that, if it was to be close, I think abusing children is evil. So I'm gonna go I think I wouldn't say bad, but I think because there's something really aspirational about it. Like, that belief in, I think I like the people who would believe in this argument. It's very, I feel like they're the kind of people who would try to do good in the world, hopefully. Or maybe it breeds passivity because you think that God will fix all your problems. I don't know, but there's something hopeful about it. So I'm going to put it in rather than bad. Thank you for sticking with me so long. If you've gotten this far, like, consider subscribing for more rambly content like this. I make lots of variety stuff. I hope you enjoy. Alright, we're getting into, and now we have filled one and everything. Okay, next one is the argument from personal experience. And this is the idea of, like, people with really compelling stories about why they believe in God. It's just purely, like, anecdotal, as in, it's like, but it's like a strong personal sense that they have really encountered God. Maybe they had, like, a near-death experience, or it could be during, like, a prayer where they really felt seen and answered. Maybe they got something that they really, like, deeply needed and they felt the guidance of God. Either way, it was like a personal, qualitative experience that led them to this conclusion. And I think, that's honestly beautiful. Like, I think that should be the basis for believing God. Like, definitely not Pascal's wager. I'm sorry, Pascal, but, like, no. But something like your personal belief. I think, and honestly, if anything, like, if I experienced something that made me truly, like, without a doubt, so sure that God was present in my life and God existed, then I think by all means I would believe it. And in fact, I would argue that it would be delulu not to. Like, you kind of have to stick, like, your senses, and you are all you have. And if your senses tell you that God exists, then I think you kind of have to do it. You kind of have to believe it. Where this argument falls short, obviously, is that you cannot use this to convince others. I mean, you could probably inspire others, but you cannot use this to reliably argue to others because, by necessity, like, everyone's an island. You're never going to be able to explain fully, I think, to other people and like, convince them otherwise. I think this argument is purely for yourself. So I think, It's not even intellectually interesting. I think it's good, but I think it's as a result of that. But it's good spiritually. It's just not good as an argument. It's either or good. I don't think I've made a very continuous spectrum. I don't know. Maybe I'll let you guys decide. Let me know if it's or good. Maybe emoji is a sun emoji for good. Is like the straight face emoji. Let me know. So if you see people commenting suns and the emoji, you'll know what that means. Alright. Let's go with miracles first. Argument from miracles. And this is very simply like the fact that if you observe miracle, if you've observed a miracle, then the only explanation is God. And a miracle is something that cannot be explained by science. You can see a picture example. It would be like Moses parting the seas. Like that's not physically explainable by science. So we know that God exists. I don't know much about this, to be honest. I think if I witnessed a miracle, then sure, I would believe in God. But the issue with that is that, like, how do you define a miracle? And by definition, a miracle is something that is, not explained by science. Or, like, but the issue with that is, like, you don't know whether it's inexplicable by science, full stop, or if it's just unexplained, like, for now. It could be that you just lack the necessary information to figure out how the miracle happened. And eventually, if you knew enough information, you would know how it happened, and it wasn't a miracle at all. So I think I don't know too much about miracles here for me to say. But if I had to think, maybe like medical miracles, for example, I think are really, really powerful ones. Like I think people who, were close to death but somehow recovered. First of all, that shows such a strong, like, spirit, like a will. I really believe in that. Like I think your willpower and stuff. Not to say that people who suffer from illness don't have willpower. I don't mean it like that. But like I think medical miracles are beautiful and truly marvelous. But I don't know if I have the authority to say that they're miracles and not just another part of medical science that we haven't yet explained. But personally, I do find it compelling. Like, I love that we don't have all the answers. And I personally do think that, there is something miraculous about it, whether or not it's God. But I do believe, like, the human spirit is very powerful. But I think this is similar to the argument from personal experience. If it's a true miracle, then sure, I think it's interesting. But, I think this is a bit more interesting than personal experience just because it's something that you could observe. So it's interesting, but it's hard to go from there. Let me know if you know any famous miracles. I think even things like the biblical story of Jesus handing out the fish, I think there was an explanation. Like, even though there were only like 5 fish and a few breads, I think what happened was, and it fed like 3,000 people. But I think I remember reading somewhere that it was like every person, when they passed it, they just took out a bit of the food they already had hidden in their sleeve or something, and that was enough to like feed themselves. So yeah, that was a miracle. A man-made one though, but still a miracle. I like the idea of humans creating our own miracles. So yeah, interesting, but not a argument. And that brings us, last but not least, the argument from consciousness. Spelt weirdly. So, alright. So basically, I think this one is very similar to the idea of like first causes. And this is a mystery that has plagued neuroscience, philosophy, physics, biology forever. And this is like, when did consciousness come into existence? So I think there are some unexplained, like, quote-unquote miracles in science. I think one of them is like, organic life, right? Honestly, it's such a miracle that evolved from like nothing, from like carbon, from stardust. We birthed into existence. Like, that is honestly incredible to think about. But, the next one is consciousness. Like, how is it, like, the fact that I'm conscious, you're conscious, that we can have thoughts and we are aware of our own thoughts, like, honestly, is a true miracle. And we only have access to those thoughts, but it's nothing and yet it's everything. Like, that is a true miracle, and the only thing that could explain that is God. I guess this is also going into like mind-body dualism, Descartes kind of thing. I could make an entire video about, you know, the existence of the soul or whatever. I think that would be such a big, like, whether or not we have one, or are we just physical matter. But the idea is like God is what allowed consciousness to be created. And I don't know much about it, but I think it's something that I definitely want to explore more, like this origin of consciousness and all that. But I don't know if it necessarily necessitates that God made it, you know. But I love the topic of consciousness and where it came, and also like the uniqueness of consciousness, like just that experience. If you close your eyes now and breathe, like that feeling, that presence is so unique and so human and whole and universal. I don't know if it's God, but definitely it's something worth exploring. And I think I could spend my whole life picking my own brain about this. So definitely at least intellectually interesting. And so there we have it. My tier list on arguments for the existence of God. The existence of God. Wow, that felt really good for the soul. I hope you enjoyed that. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I would love to have discussions about this. Now I guess I can have a religion reveal or so called. Like, I don't know. Let me know if you've guessed accurately what I think about God. And now I'll tell you. I mean, I'm not particularly religious. I guess I did have a religious background, like, yeah, when I was younger, but like now I'm just, you know, I'm just floating through life agnostically, I suppose. But I'm definitely open to spirituality. It's just that I just don't have any strong particular religious affiliations or anything like that. But yes, that's how I feel. I think I'm open to it. So it's from that kind of open and curious perspective from which we're approaching these arguments. I hope that clarifies it. And thank you for sticking around this long. Please stay well until the next philosophy or otherwise video, and see you next time. Bye bye.